During the One Piece Reverie, we had a lot of cool conversations, and obviously it was nice seeing everybody again in Reverie, talk about various things that's going on in the community, talk about the story as a whole, One Piece. And Roger, who's the host of Reverie this time around, had a lot of interesting takes about Sir Crocodile, okay? Crocodile, you can argue the left-hand man, if you would, of Pirate Emperor Buggy at this point in time. And everyone understands that at some point in the future, we are gonna have Brachio Mihawk versus Ronor Zoro. But Roger's also adamant about having Sanji fight against Crocodile. If Zoro fights against Mihawk, then the parallel to that for Sanji will be fighting Crocodile, because he believes that Buggy and company will be at odds with Luffy's crew. And then Crocodile finally come face to face with Mr. Prince. I understand that Crocodile has gotten a lot stronger since way back when in Alabasta, but I've always been against the idea of Crocodile being Sanji's opponent in the future. I really have been. I never really saw the reason for it, and I've been more of the idea that Sanji's final fight in the story would be along the lines of what he proclaimed during Thriller Bark, where he told Kuma that the Marines have to worry about Sanji the most, that he would be their biggest issue, their biggest threat. So I feel like Sanji's main fight will probably be along those lines. But the reason why ultimately I'm starting the video off like this, talking about Crocodile, is because yes, Crocodile has gone stronger, a lot stronger, but how much stronger is stronger? And if there were to be an actual, let's say in the future, a fight between Sanji and Crocodile in the same way you have Mihawk versus Zoro, is it possible that Crocodile has gone to that point where he could be equal to Sanji once Zoro is being able to fight against Mihawk? Because obviously at this point in time, most folks understand by now that when it comes to the parallel between Zoro and Sanji in terms of power, they are relatively equal. There's more and more and more evidence and even information in magazines that Oda himself reviews telling you as such that Zoro and Sanji equal. Furthermore, Sanji is getting Conqueror's Haki in the future. He's going to need that to try and do lasting damage to an immortal being like killing Ham. Okay, if Sanji is getting Conqueror's Haki, is it possible then that Crocodile right now has Conqueror's Haki? And not just Conqueror's Haki, but Conqueror's Haki Infusion. We have something to talk about. A big announcement, because the world, the entire world of One Piece has been brought to a new level via an island-to-island poster collection. That's right, travel posters that you can get for your wall, for your setup, for all the islands of One Piece. We're talking about Skypiea, which is one of the best arcs in the entire series. If you say no, you're wrong. We're talking about Enies Lobby, Marineford, Whole Cake Island, Wano Country, and more. Literally all your favorite islands that you remember reading and watching in One Piece, from Windmill Village all the way to El Buffet. And the best part is that you can use my link to buy any of these 2 posters. And guess what? If you buy 2 posters, you get not 1, not 2, but 3 extra posters for free. You heard right. That is the deal for this month of July only. And if that deal titillates your soul, gets the blood pumping, then hit your boy's link in the description box down below to get your posters today while the deal lasts. Is it possible that Sir Crocodile is able to infuse his gigantic sandstorms, his death touch where he just soaks all the moisture out of you, his gigantic sand blades, with Conqueror's Haki Infusion? And just like Buggy, he has 2 individuals, 2 wings if you would, that also have Conqueror's Haki Infusion, and making Buggy truly someone viable to be the king of the pirates in some sense. Now, there is a greater reason as to why this is kind of important, and why Kaido may have been right the entire time. All along, Kaido was on point, because potentially everybody that we have seen in the story who's of high standing and of high note, they need to get Conqueror's Haki, and not just the knocking out feature, but the infusion feature, because of the upcoming final war. We know that the final war is happening soon, and when it happens, whether it's going to be before or after the One Piece treasure, all depends on Oda. Based on Whitebeard's comments during Marineford, it would feel like the final war is happening after the treasure is found. But then based on Oda's own comments in interviews and so on, the One Piece treasure would be the last thing in the story. So we don't know exactly when it's going to be, the One Piece treasure itself. But we do know that there are a cornucopia of immortal beings that have to deal with in the future of the story. Not only do you have the Holy Knights, obviously, but also have the 5 Elders, and the 5 Elders are on a higher strata of immortality factor than the knights themselves. And in order to weaken someone like Emu, or you can maybe even argue, potentially, Blackbeard, if BB is able to assimilate Emu's powers, right, you would need to be able to do lasting damage to an immortal being somehow, some way. So on that note, real quick, Blackbeard, I think, is one of the few exceptions to the rule where I would assume he does have Conqueror's Haki infusion. However, when he fought against Law on Winter Island, and he had those big bolts of Haki and so on, as far as we know, officially, as far as we know, those are not Conqueror's Haki bolts. We know that the man has the Observation Haki because he could sense Luffy's Haki level back in Impel Down, and we saw him use Armor Haki when he blocked S-Hawk's attack. But nowhere so far in the story, or even outside the story, let's say in magazines, or let's say in SBSs, or the comments, or interviews, nowhere has it been said that Blackbeard, Mr. All Day, Every Day, 24/7, 365 is there. Nowhere has it been stated as of yet that he has Conqueror's Haki. And there's a possibility that he may never get Conqueror's Haki. He may be very, very different than his dad, Zebek, where Zebek had oodles of Conqueror's Haki, but he doesn't necessarily need it to counter powers because he has the power of the Yami Yami, the Darkness fruit. On paper, even Diamond in Versailles wouldn't work against someone like Blackbeard because he has the Yami Yami. He counters all abilities across the board. That's the idea, at least. So he doesn't need that power, and it can be very effective against immortal beings like Holy Knights, even Elders, and even Emu himself, potentially, right? Especially Emu in his real body, where in his real body, he doesn't have that shadow figure going on, so he's not intangible. Blackbeard is a theorized player, for the most part, against Emu and company. It's going to likely be the case, given what Zebek said in the God Valley flashback, but we don't know. But we do know for a fact, 100%, that the Rev are going to be major adversaries against and already are major players against the world government. And right now, the only person I can think of that could have Conqueror's Haki among the Rev is Sir Monkey D. Dragon. That's it. He's the only one I can think of that actually has Conqueror's Haki, probably in fusion. But what does that mean then for doing lasting damage to an immortal being like the Holy Knights and the Elders? Well, in Elbaf, we do see how Zoro is really interested in this metal, this steel heart that Summers has. Zoro has been focused on that a few times, and it feels like that metal heart is going to be a key thing to taking down a lot of the Holy Knights in the future. Maybe the Elders too if they have metal hearts, but at least the Holy Knights. However, when Killingham fights against Sanji says, "I know your weakness." Killingham says, "Oh, so that means that you have King's Haki too?" So King's Haki still matters against Holy Knights. Feels to have immortality factor. That's still the case, because in general, Haki, like Kaido says, can transcend all things. And it does have ability negation effects. The greater your Haki, the more things that you can negate in theory, i.e. Big Mom and Kaido versus Law's ability, where Law's ability just would not work on Big Mom and Kaido. In fact, I'd argue we haven't seen Luffy do the same thing. Luffy's so far in the story has not shown the Haki pool or strength to be on the same level as Big Mom or Kaido, to where passively they can mitigate or completely negate the effects of powers on them. We have not seen that yet from Monkey D, but Luffy is still on the path to having that Haki that can transcend all things. But going back to the Rev here, the Revolutionary Army, I would say only have one guy that's a really super Haki prowess, and that's probably Monkey D. Dragon. Sabo, Ivankov, let's say in the future Kuma if he comes back to the Rev, and so on. None of these guys, Karasu, Morley, Limburg, Fellow Betty, and so on, none of these individuals seem to have any degree of Conqueror's Haki, let alone Conqueror's Haki infusion, which you need to do damage to immortal beings. Though Sabo, I would say, is the closest to having Conqueror's Haki and infusion, because we saw during Dressrosa how good he was, how proficient his Dragon Claws were, his Ryusoken, whereas Dragon Claws, they were able to utilize Armor Haki and probably even Ryo Haki, where you could find weak points in the ground or in things, and then be able to pump his Haki into that, ejecting it like Ryo Haki, and then do like insane damage as a result of that. So he does have very good Haki prowess. You can argue that his ability to find weak spots and then pump Haki into those is a combination of Observation Haki to perceive those weak points and then actually flow the Haki into it with his Ryo Haki. So Sabo has very, very good Haki, and it would not shock me in the slightest. Sabo getting in the future Conqueror's Haki, and yes, even Infusion. You could argue, okay, well, having Infusion is kind of crazy because let's say he gets in the future, doesn't have it now, or let's say he already got it at some point off screen as of late, and then he's gonna have Infusion later on. Well, that's a pretty crazy window of time to go from Haki, Conqueror's Haki, the knocking out one, to Infusion. But I would say in the case of Sabo and guys like Sanji too, given their intelligence, their perceptions of Haki, they could be able to not necessarily skip a step, but they could speed run it. Towards Sanji, recall how Sanji got his Ifrit Janbei. The Ifrit Janbei, he just thought about it and then he just did it, boom. Sabo's also a pretty smart guy too, and then his Ryo Haki is what Luffy used in Wano Country to use as a bedrock to utilize Conqueror's Haki Infusion. In chapter 1010, you don't really get that sense, but in the anime version, you do get that sense, where like the Ryo Haki was like what he used to really understand the flow of Haki, even Conqueror's Haki, and that's why you have the episode where it's all the crazy effects, and they have the glowing golden lights, you have the music going on, all kind of stuff. Is it possible where in the future, it's not just someone like Sabo, could also Ivankov, if Sanji has the traits, because X, Y, and Z reasons, his burdens that he puts on himself, the self-sacrifice, the self-loathing of his own powers, things of that sort, Sanji has damned off his own Conqueror's Haki. Could that apply to other characters as well? Could someone like Ivankov be in a similar situation? For whatever reason, because we know that Ivankov does have some certain secrets involving Crocodile, that maybe Sanji is also privy to. Roger, during the Reverie, also mentioned that as well. The Sanji and Crocodile connects to Ivankov. So it could be a factor for a potential fight between those two in the future. If Ivankov were to get it too, is that off base? Is it really off base considering Ivankov's standing in the world, considering Ivankov seems to be the third member of the Rev that's second only to Sabo and Dragon? You could argue the third wing. Is it possible that Ivankov could also get Conqueror's Haki in the future and has, again, similar damage to Sanji, but they'll get in the future for the main necessity to be able to do what? To do lasting damage to an immortal being. I wouldn't say it would apply to Limburg or Karasu or Morley or Belo Betty, no. But for someone like Ivankov, I think it could be possible. I know people are like, oh my God, wait, so we're handing out Conqueror's Haki like hotcakes? No, we're not. Think about it. The only other person to have Conqueror's Haki on Big Mom's crew was Katakuri. That's only two folks in the entirety of the Big Mom Pirates. Kaido was the only person on his crew to have Conqueror's Haki. And also, mind you too, with Katakuri, he had no infusion. Beyond that, the only person we have seen on Shanks' crew who has Conqueror's Haki is Shanks himself, though I'm willing to bet that Ben Beckman has Conqueror's Haki. And there's even a One Piece filler episode, it's filler, but there is a One Piece episode that's based on the film Red special, episode 1030, where he does scare off a few mountain bandits, which could have been Conqueror's Haki when he scared them off. He intimidated them. And I'm also willing to bet that Lucky Roo and Yasop also have Conqueror's Haki. Maybe not infusion, but they have Conqueror's Haki. And then among Buggy's crew, Buggy has it. Oh my God, Buggy has Conqueror's Haki. Oh, say the Buggy fanboys and fangirls out there. Maybe. It's very likely that Mihawk has it. Crocodile though, have to wait and see. So even among the top end crews, you don't see a lot of folks that can use Conqueror's Haki, let alone Conqueror's Haki Infusion. But we do that for Roger's crew. He had three guys that had Conqueror's Haki and Infusion. Himself, Rayleigh, and Scopper. And actually, we can include Oden as well too. So we had four guys. Oden, the Chad of Wano, Scopper Gibbon, Rayleigh, and Roger himself. The Strat crew in principle should be better than that crew in the future. So those are the pirates. And as for the Marines, you have Sengoku, you have Garp, maybe a Kainu has it. That is possible. I won't deny that. I don't think, though, Kuzan or Kizaru have Conqueror's Haki. And for Green Fujitora, I doubt that as well. I really, really do. Smoker would be a crazy wild card. Smoker having Conqueror's Haki would kind of throw cats like, wait a minute, what? But at the same time, if Oda wants to make Smoker relevant again, and power power sprint the hell out of Smoker, one way of doing that would be Conqueror's Haki for Smoker. You give Smoker some Conqueror's Haki, maybe an infusion, because Smoker in this sense here could be, he is definitely a Marine, kind of like Fujitora, but he could be more committed to a certain ideal, and maybe after Punk Hazard, he could have gotten that sort of clarity that he needed to undo the walls, the dams that block the flow of Conqueror's Haki. It's not to say that everyone has the traits of Conqueror's Haki. But if Smoker is going to be, let's say, another person that's going to be standing up against the world government in the future as a Marine, Fujitora was able to fight against Green Bull, and you can see his conviction. Made for Smoker, he has the same conviction, and he has also the traits of a Conqueror's Haki user. That's someone who was forgotten, essentially, in terms of the story relevance. Smoker could have major relevance again in the future. That's how you do it. I'm not saying that it's every person's gonna be top tier is gonna have it. Of course not. The numbers won't bear it out that way. They will not. But if Haki, again, what Kaido said, if Haki transcends all things, even immortality factor, and there are many immortal beings in the Holy Land, 9+ holy knights, and then 5 elders, you need 14 other people that are on the good guy side of the aisle, quote unquote good guy side of the aisle, that would have Conqueror's Haki and infusion. If you have that many cats who have immortal beings, then you need that much more Conqueror Haki users in the final war to take them on. So try and fill in who those cats will be. Folks like Boy Hancock will probably get infusion later on, so they can actually do damage to these immortal beings, allied with Luffy and company. But you need more in general, right? And Oda, in some way, is probably setting up Sanji's Conqueror's Haki now to get ready for the final war against the Holy Land, where there are gonna be more immortal beings, and that means that we need more infusion users. And I'm telling you, Sabo, Ivankov, Smoker even, right? Maybe Crocodile. Yeah, maybe even Crocodile. They could be on the table. But I still don't see Sanji fight against Crocodile for some sort of final, nah. But that is my stance on this topic. Let me know your stance on the subject matter at hand. If you enjoy your boys' video content, give it a thumbs up. Of course, members do that first. You do have access to the video first. And obviously, you guys can, in general, sub to your boys' channel. Click on that bell to join the notification squad. And I'll catch you guys and gals on the flip side.